Hello, y'all. I'm gonna be playing like 2 volumes today. Today being the day that I released Bitcon and Husks routes on YouTube. I'm just wanting to get to Volume 5 Route 2 as fast as I can because I'm yearning. Because apparently Mashiri's route is like fucking pale fan service, like all the way through. So I want to get to that, but you know, I want to be proper about it. Well, Volume 4 of Stagecraft and Survival. Most people, apparently, according to Badger, would go for Orica first, but I'm gonna be a bitch. No time to think, no time to breathe. Your name is Cecily Yapara, and you are busy. Indari Vernier, or Orica Roast. Let's go for Indari first. You are done with operating solely on assumptions after your last dead end. Still, you know the importance of digging into any lead you can get, especially now. Said lead may stem from a moronic claim given to you by a less moronic than you had hoped individual, but you have a feeling that Indari Vernier may be able to provide you with useful information. From the metaphorical waste basin of former dead ends, your very own boulevard of broken leads, you feel a promising case start to emerge. One potential connection in particular lingers in the back of your mind. As much as you initially thought it was unlikely, you're beginning to realise that the subject of cultist activity has been too conveniently linked to your search path thus far. Your mysterious correspondent certainly seemed to have a lot to say about it. The relevance of their confounding cogitations are questionable at best. It all sounds like nothing more than the same vacuous nonsense that usually comes with your correspondent's tango. Still, surely the stage that's been set for your song and dance must have some relevance of its own, as much as you can justify from your close encounters of the corn cult kind at any rate. Oh, that was pretty good. You're getting better at this monologuing thing, you think? Too bad there's not some sort of unseen audience that's privy to your innermost thoughts. Back to the matter at hand. It's still a hunch, but it's one with far more backing than your last, and at this point, not an idea you can really afford to disregard. You make up your mind. It's high time you found some new avenues of possibility. It doesn't take you long to pinpoint your next mark's location. The invasive advertising littering the streets provides you with the information you need before you can even wonder where to come across it. Looks like you were just in time to make it to the end of an ongoing show at Stronghold 21's largest theatre, and it's not all that far either. The building itself is an architectural standout considering it's one of the oldest structures in this part of the Stronghold. Its distinctive aesthetic makes the theatre entrance an effortless find, which really you're thankful for. You've been through enough toilsome rat mazes in recent memory. Of course, you're also without any sort of invitation or purchased tickets to this event. Not that such a dilemma's ever stopped you before, it certainly isn't going to start now. It's all in the way you carry yourself. A simple display of persuasion here, a little flash of authority there at the entrance, and you're all set, easy. You waste no time moving swiftly across the theatre's lobby, straight towards the padded doors at the opposite end of the room. The questioning glances you receive along the way are dutifully ignored. From this side you can hear the thrum of the speakers projecting a single voice on stage. Occasional hoots, haws, and sounds of endearment emanate from what you can estimate as a rather large audience. Sounds like a busy show, not the kind you're very partial to, but you never intended on sticking around to watch anyway. You crack the door open. It's a dark, massive room. The only sources of illumination are the various flashing effects and lights coming off the side of the stage. A few observers seated at the back cast an annoyed glance in your direction as the stage lights are momentarily dulled by your intrusive presence in the lit doorway. You have more important things to concern yourself with than the fleeting emotions of complete strangers. They'll live, you think, before slipping inside and letting the door shut behind you. You take a moment to map out the room, charting the open spaces for the best path through. Then you direct your gaze toward what's holding everyone's attention. Your target is on the stage up ahead, beaming with exuberant energy as he flits about the beautifully decorated scene in a series of graceful steps. His movements are fluid, smooth, a skillful dance to accompany his act, and a grandiose display of charisma. The audience is growing progressively more anxious, it seems. There's a sense of anticipation in the air, as what you can only assume to be some sort of grand finale is built up. You really did arrive with perfect timing. You may even be able to get through this investigation in a timely fashion if you manage to catch him fast enough. Even before you got your referral from BitCon, you could have easily called his face to mind, what with it being plastered on all manner of public advertisements and news feeds. Being quite the acclaimed illusionary performer and well-known celebrity across the mass, Indari Vernier's rising star makes for no small target. He first started to pop up on the public radar as a small street performer, doing little magic tricks and celestial readings for anyone that came by. Eventually, he gained enough recognition that some big leading hotshots saw fit to give him an opportunity on the stage, which turned out to be a huge success and further skyrocketed his popularity. Now he spends the majority of his time putting on large-scale shows for massive audiences, travelling all around the continent and accruing even more attention from the masses. What's more noteworthy to you, though, are the hushed whispers of what came before his rise to fame. There's a quiet but pervasive rumour that surfaces from time to time, detailing a past supposedly rife with cultist activity, which he has consistently avoided addressing when mentioned. Perhaps he has something worth hiding. If there's any validity to this gossip in the slightest, you'd like to see what exactly lies behind it for yourself. You move away from the door, still keeping close to the back wall and slipping into the shadows. It's best not to draw more attention to yourself than necessary, which means you are not going to make a single sound while Indari is still up on the stage. You have plenty of talents to offer the world, but this is not your preferred method of display. The logical course of action would be to sneak into the backstage area and catch him there, preferably without an audience's observance. At this point, the music in the auditorium has reached a vibrant crescendo, and Indari is poised to unveil one final trick. With an intricate motion of his hand, the show's climax is revealed. A swarm of rats rushes the stage, seeming to appear from thin air. The horde of rodent bodies pulses and jitters across the floor in a shockingly coordinated visual display. A final, triumphant bray from the orchestra, resembling a tada, follows the stupefying act. The audience is transfixed with silence before erupting into a hollering frenzy. The sound is abhorrent to your easily agitated auricular canals, a none too gentle reminder that you would really like to get away from it as quickly as possible. And now just happens to be the perfect opportunity you were waiting for. You use the uproar to slip through unnoticed, making your way past the crowd by sticking close to the walls. You dive through a set of doors near the stage. The backstage hall appears to be vacant. Your guess is that any personnel who would normally be back here is busy helping with either the stage production or the audience. It's definitely not empty though. Along the length of the hallway there's an assortment of stage props, costumes and other typical theatrical junk haphazardly arranged against the walls. Everything is conveniently labelled, including the door you just went through. It only takes you a second to spot the one labelled with a stage sign, where you can expect your target to be coming through any time now. Excellent. Although you'd be considerably more thrilled about this newfound strategic position if you weren't still dealing with all of that awful noise. You assumed it would be at least somewhat quieter back here. Unfortunately for you, it appears there's a few built-in speakers lining the ceiling. It must be tapped directly into the stage's microphones. You can hear the vocalisations of the show just as clearly as if you were back in the auditorium. Probably for the benefit of any stagehands and performers waiting back here that need to respond to cues. At least this auditory monitoring system will tell you exactly when the door is about to open. You'll just try to focus on that for now. You don't even have time to finish a new thought before the door swings open with no warning. Someone nearly runs into you in their haste. Oh! Indari jumps back, startled. You can't really blame him for not expecting anyone to have been at the bottom of the stairs when he came through. Pardon me, dear, You're not usually back here. I don't believe I've seen you before. His disposition is sweet, almost sickeningly so. It gives you an unsettling inkling that you're in for another tedious interaction. Still, there's no need to be too harsh too soon. I can't say I'm a frequent attendee, no. I'm Chief Regulator Cecily Yapara. I have a few questions for you regarding an ongoing case. I would also like to make this as quick as possible. I'm sure you've got plenty of other things to be doing, as do I. Indari's eyes seemed to light up at the prospect, completely dissolving any prior hint of wariness in his expression. Right, yes. I thought you might be coming by sometime soon. It's an honour to meet you indeed. I'd be happy to provide any assistance that I'm capable of. I'm sure you're already aware, but for the sake of return formalities, my name is Indari Vernier. What would you like to know, Regulator? You might as well get the most pressing matter out of the way, even if you're not looking forward to talking about it again in any sort of detail whatsoever. Judging by Indari's attitude so far and who he's acquainted with, you're likely going to get more nonsense that you'd strictly prefer. First off, I would like to follow up on an alibi provided by Bitcoin Crypto. He claimed that the two of you are close. The only semblance of an explanation for his lack of involvement in the crime was that the two of you and a few others were eating together at the time of the incident. As it stands, I'm not very inclined to believe such a flimsy excuse. Did he relay a ludicrous amount of our outing to you as well? It is absolutely not how he described it, I assure you. The ridiculous parts, at least, I mean. Really, it's quite adorable to see him much more speechless than usual in certain situations. But yes, he was with me for sure, as well as our other two companions. We were all rather tight-knit, a very solid group if I do say so myself. Believe me, his attention was stolen and the man himself was wholly occupied through the entire night. And I know for a fact that if anything abnormal was indeed occurring, he would have been a bit more distracted. He wasn't involved in this ordeal. As troubling as he can be at times, I promise Bit is a genuine sweetheart where it counts. We have a really difficult time imagining that in any possible way. From what I understand of the situation, I don't believe it's actually something he would mess with. You're welcome to ask the others too if you'd like, of course. However, unless you happen to find yourself already speaking to them for a different reason, I wouldn't see it being a very effective use of your time. You won't argue with that claim. Most likely he's right. You'd only be presented with the same unavailing cover story about how much of a good group of friends they are over anything valuable. Nothing said here really proves anything one way or another, but whatever. It's still a dead end unless you can come up with a more solid evidence in the future. Also, you just do not want to talk about that guy ever again, unless absolutely necessary, so you won't as long as you can help it. You sigh. Sure, I suppose that's enough about him for now. Is that all you came here to inquire about, Miss Yapara? Not exactly, no. I also received what appears to be an odd flyer for some of your horoscope reading services. I was under the impression that you had mostly stopped doing those, but your history with them leads me to believe you may have some valuable insight on certain occult practices regardless. Indari falls silent for a short moment, freezing in place with a hint of unease, almost as if you had just insulted him in some way. It doesn't last though, as he quickly recollects himself and doubles back on his former disposition. Odd. A flyer? What flyer do you mean? You pull the slip of paper out of your coat pocket, handing it over to him. He's relatively collected, but still seems rather eager to take it from you. Oh, I completely forgot I had even passed this particular one on. You are correct, though. Unfortunately, I do not get to do these much anymore. The flyer is absolutely outdated and not very relevant. I've only passed a few of these off in the past to specific individuals I trust. The public gets a bit hectic over the idea, considering my position now. Most use it more as a means of getting close to me, rather than actually holding any interest in the service itself. But I also simply prefer to focus on my performance work instead. Well, even if you stopped entirely at this point, it's not been that long since you were at least somewhat involved. These sorts of practices are usually found in niche worship traditions, primarily important to devout individuals. Certainly that implies that you have at least some sort of familiarity with the idea, doesn't it? A few of the trolls have started to come into the hallway by now. Once again his presentation shifts slightly, showing a faint glimmer of discomfort. His eyes dart briefly to each of his sides in turn. Does it? I don't believe interest in the subject at large and the associated ideas ideals themselves have to come hand in hand, strictly speaking. I am very sorry that I don't say very much. I just don't know much context behind this, plus I'm like, even if I did understand, I'm like, I only really like try to focus on what I'm doing rather than thinking about anything. Space and the scope of the stars can hold an array of meanings and importance to different individuals for different reasons. That's not what I asked. He's dodging the question. You expected this, at least partially, but the more you see from him, the more you wonder why he's acting so secretive and avoidant of the subject. Being overly suspicious is still not something you'd like to get into a habit of, but sometimes a little concern can prove to be useful in the end. Perhaps we should move somewhere else if we are to continue this conversation, yes? I'd hate for us to be in everyone's way. Or potentially release sensitive information to any prying ears, intentional or otherwise. That's fine, I suppose. As long as we hurry it up. I'm not here to bounce locations a dozen times for a single conversation. Please, not again. My dressing room is likely to be the most suitable place that also guarantees privacy for the rest of our chat. If that's alright with you, it's right over there, so not far at all. He points to the door right across from the stage entrance. You noticed it when you came in, considering it features his own name plastered on a large star-shaped sign. Not too hard to find. Sure. Excellent. You watch idly as he moves around you, toward the door. He procures a key from his pocket and turns the lock, only for the door handle to remain firmly in place when he pushes down on it. The stage performer frowns, letting out a small huff. He fiddles with the key, making slight changes in the way he's moving the handle each time he tries again. It doesn't budge. Oh dear. My apologies, this has been giving me some trouble as of late, and I had so hoped it wouldn't act up now of all times. He gives it a few more tries while pulling back, a discontent frown now evident on his face. Great, just what you needed. More inane complications and delays to eat up your time. You better not be stalling on purpose. Pulling the wool over your eyes is an extremely regrettable choice for anyone to make. Take it to another room then. I'm sure there's somewhere else that would work just fine. Well, I do have another solution. A little trick up my sleeve, you could say. Sit tight for just a moment. He then scurries off into another room down the hall. At first you consider going after him. He could be making some sort of escape for all you know. There is only a brief moment of hesitation before you start to hear a repetitive clattering sound up above, gradually moving closer to where you're standing. Is he... He is absolutely crawling through the ventilation system. This is so absurd you even feel partially inclined to give a shit, but honestly, as long as it works, you could care less what he's doing. You follow the sounds of his movements. It all comes to a catastrophic conclusion in the form of a loud crash and a yelp coming from inside the room in front of you. That's one way to do it, you suppose. A moment later he's opened the sparkling door, grinning wide and spreading his arms out in a bit of a dramatic flare. Ta-da! All sorted. Please, come in. Indari then steps aside, giving you an opening to come into the room. Once you're through, the performer gently shuts the door behind you. Sorry about the mess. Things are usually at least a smidge tidier around here. The room is a little cluttered, covered in haphazardly strung about articles of clothing and boxes filled with props, along with some miscellaneous personal belongings. It would seem that he spends quite a bit of time in here, outside of just preparing himself for shows. Nothing too unusual for the most part, really. Except for a particular decorative piece that catches your eye. In the far corner of the room, hanging just above a chaise lounge, is a large dual-pronged resonator. The kind that you're certain only belongs to a very specific and supposedly disbanded cult. If he's so keen on hiding any sort of personal cult-related history, why in the world does he have this on display? You're more than welcome to take a seat somewhere if you'd like. I'm fine as I am. I'll keep standing. Very well, not a problem. Now, I would appreciate it if you gave my question a proper answer. A simple yes or no would have been an acceptable start. Your reluctance to provide even that much does not do you any favours as far as convincing me of your own innocence in this case goes. Well, yes, I can see that. I do wish to apologise for seeming rather uncooperative a moment prior. That was not the impression I wished to relay by any means. I don't normally talk about these sort of things with strangers, but I do understand the gravity of the situation, and I would hate to withhold anything that could be useful to you. Now that we're out of snooping range, allow me to be more sincere. I'm listening. He straightens himself, taking in a steadying breath before continuing. Let me get this out of the way. Yes, I do have prior history with some organised fanatic groups, perhaps more so than you may initially guess. However, I have left all of those practices and beliefs behind. My avoidance of the subject is due to both personal disdain as well as precaution toward my own safety. The discomfort he displayed earlier now bears a new context. His last words possess a scintilla of genuine fear. You'll have to tread carefully. He seems willing enough to discuss this, but it's clearly a sensitive topic. Too much prying into his past could be unwise if the interview is to remain cordial. But I do not wish to burden you with excessive personal history on this subject. Provide as much detail as you see fit. Of course, most of my information is rather dated, but I do know a great deal of things concerning some specific groups and their operations in the recent past. So, I'll share what I can. Well, that's a clearer answer than you were expecting. Almost a bit disappointing if he really is being truthful right now. You can't help but hope for something a bit more challenging to dig into sometimes. Though there is still at least one more piece of evidence that needs an explanation. There's a few questions that I have left for you. Either way, perhaps you can still get something out of this. You decide to get him talking about horoscope relevance. What you'd really like is some information on the religious groups that do the sort of thing he's done before, gauge how plausible it may actually be that some cult could be behind this. You've seen quite an array of different sects and doctrines focused either on Caperia, Gaion, or both. Far more minuscule in scope are any practices related to the Vivifier. It's not easy to find any information on those, past vague whispers and rumours. The subject of your burglary, however, is relevant to the belief in her existence, at least to an extent. There's no doubt that something like the filter would be tremendously valuable to those who have faith in its properties. That's not a new conclusion. But as you said, these sorts tend to be a bit difficult to trace. You don't know much about their values or capabilities. They cover their tracks well. You need a better profile. A good enough place to start, you suppose, would be to better understand something you've already been talking about. Celestial reading is something that was supposedly practiced by the Vivifier, isn't it? I'm aware not many people follow that line of faith anymore, but what about your specific beliefs? Was that a part of it? Oh, absolutely. You may be inching closer to being more personal than you'd normally like for a case, but it's not like you have a lot of options here. You'll just have to hope you can keep it as short as possible. Then what can you tell me about your former group's functioning as far as that tradition goes? His eyes wander down toward the floor, contemplative and unsure, filling the silent gap in conversation with a feeling you can't place. It's still lingering there when he glances back at you. Well, horoscope reading came from the idea that the Vivifier herself was a prophetic and divine individual. She possessed great insight into the future, in addition to all the other ostensibly wondrous things about her. It led to many trolls to seek her guidance, and eventually try to imitate her in all sorts of ways. So they learned how to read the heavens in correlation to the things she taught. Oh, and his sombre mood suddenly brightens back up to a tremendous degree. What also altered perceptions of how the stars in the sky were viewed in general. It started a trend of properly categorising constellations. The Daughter, for example. It's a constellation whose identity changed throughout the Renaissance. At first it was believed to have been a prophecy of the Vivifier's arrival, so trolls used it to honour her during her time of highest relevance. He's not really talking about the cult so much as he is just relaying asterism tales. This sort of history lesson isn't exactly what you were looking for, but you'll continue to humour him for the moment. Later it was also interpreted as a symbol of hope, that either she or a descendant of hers would somehow return to us after she vanished. Of course, there are many other constellations and individual celestial bodies that have their own prescribed meanings. Okay, now you've heard enough. He's just going to keep blabbering about stars unless you intervene. Time to fix that. We're getting pretty off track. Right, sorry. You seem fairly enthusiastic about all of this for someone who claims to not follow the same principles anymore. There's clearly some connections still being harboured here. I was told you no longer do any readings yourself in the present, but have you been lying to me, Mr. Vernier? No, absolutely not. I don't do them anymore at all. Not in the same context, and definitely not as a service to anyone at least. Any interest I now have in the subject comes entirely from a perspective of fascination for cultural history and analysis of its sociological relevance. That, and I simply adore studying the stars as they are. I don't want to do any readings the way I did them before. It is a bit of a manipulative thing in and of itself, don't you think? Trying to tell someone what they're predisposed to be, or how they should behave at any given time on the expectation of a sacred predetermined outcome. The concept of fate in any form does not exactly leave much room for freedom and personal growth, I'd say. Of course, I attempted to use it as a means of positive encouragement to anyone who came to me. But that still doesn't change the fact that I was proclaiming undue authority and providing deceitful, unrealistic promises to complete strangers. I don't want to do something like that to anyone ever again, even with good intentions in mind. Well, there you have it. It's one of the reasons you dislike those particular kinds of bogus ideas. Too many people willing to exploit others. You can't really bring yourself to disagree with that last sentiment entirely, though, despite any philosophical differences you might have with Indari. Was it intentional manipulation for the sake of authoritative gain, in the case of your sect? Without a doubt. After I actually paid attention, it was very obvious. They were using their own interpretations of certain texts to spread lies, and indoctrinated me to do the same. Anything in existence, especially something as mystical and awe-inspiring as the stars, can be given a meaning to perpetuate an agenda. Perhaps not all groups that follow those beliefs intend to use them for harm, but it certainly does happen. And it happened to me. Well, that definitely marks quite a large number of boxes on your mental checklist for extremely shady cult behaviour. It doesn't really tell you anything pertinent to the case, but weirder and smaller things have become important before. Let's go for decorative resonator. The mounted item on the wall is not something you can ignore. It's the one thing you have limited knowledge on, but it still concerns you. What you do know is that it is an incredibly rare object to see anywhere, especially under the ownership of someone who claims to lack any sort of religious practice. The small cult that used this particular item in rituals was extremely focused on balance as a core principle. They vanished without a trace some time ago, though it's anyone's guess as to why. Maybe they're just hiding. I noticed the resonator on display in the corner. I don't claim to know everything about their use, but I do know where it comes from. What's the purpose of keeping it there? Indari momentarily turns his head away from you to look at the object in question, as if he was unaware of it being there in the first place. Oh, that? I suppose I find it interesting to observe, for one, in the sense that I just think it's neat. The actual use of it, however, is not something I, or anyone else for that matter, really dabble in anymore. What use would that have been, precisely? You'll be delighted to know I have just the answer. Mostly they were used in a variety of prayer rituals. The main concept behind them being that the dual prongs represented balance between both the All-Mother and the Naught-Father, and everything that they both embody. In a ritual, a member of the congregation would continually strike the resonator to generate a continuously emitted frequency. This frequency was believed to bridge the gap between our physical and ethereal dimensions, allowing direct contact with the divine. The sound itself is quite pleasant at first. It does get stale fairly quickly if you're not into it, though. But most who were using it happened to be extremely invested in the whole thing, so he shrugs delicately before continuing. The process could go on for many hours at a time. An enchanting concept in theory, yet also one that I personally find to be extremely terrifying in application. You can understand how such a frequency would become very annoying very quickly, but you're not sure exactly what would lead to him to call it terrifying. Or perhaps you can somewhat relate if it produces an effect in any way similar to that one disquieting experience you've had recently. You suppress a shudder. Something tells you this context is much more sinister than your lone incident in the fields. Elaborate. He pauses, frowning and crossing his arms in front of himself, as if to create a weak line of defence against the question. The rituals themselves were meditative. Everything surrounding it needed to be calm and quiet. That part was fine. What bothered me was when things started actually happening. Amidst the ringing, you're eventually able to hear what sounds like whispers. Usually unintelligible, but on occasion clearer things would come through, especially if there was any sort of speaker present. Of course, it didn't all amount to just that. Odd sensations, changes in the feeling of the room. Your body eventually goes numb and all you see is black, white and grey dancing in your vision. And the noise keeps getting louder. It was paranormal activity, I'm sure of it, and it felt rather like some sort of possession. Which I am not a fan of in any way. It made me extremely uncomfortable and is a huge reason as to why I didn't stick around in their midst for very long. Distortions of any kind are a curious topic in general, aren't they? I don't want anything to do with that on a personal level, but I mean, they're rather interesting to think about, I suppose. The thought of an anomaly breaching our material reality and the subjectivity of how it may be perceived by different individuals provides a lot to talk about. For example, he's going off on a tangent again. Talking about distortions and glitches in the Matrix was not the point of this. You're starting to wish you were distorted as some kind of two-dimensional figure so you could slip away from this conversation. Alright, that's enough of that. If you dislike what the resonator does so much, then why do you still keep it? And not just around, but also hung up in full display like a prized possession for that matter. For the sake of reminding myself of why I left in the first place. Maybe I should get rid of it. It's probably not the best thing to hold on to. But for now it's something I can look back on if I ever doubt my decisions at any point. It's a connection, a personal reminder of where I came from and where I absolutely do not want to return to. I see it there sometimes and it brings to mind how distressing and awful it all really was. While those were interesting and engaging stories that obviously expanded on some important lore, you're still not certain they'll actually help you locate your thief. The cult knowledge doesn't give you anything too direct to look into now, being primarily about a group that supposedly disappeared sweeps ago. You've done a lot of listening to random garbage and not enough sleuthing, much to your displeasure. Once again, you have to remind yourself that sometimes that's just what this job requires. But with that in mind, there is still one other thing you can ask. You decide to get him talking about the cult now. This particular religious sect... I cannot speak. This particular religious sect I'm hearing about, you've been referring to the same group this entire time, haven't you? And that's, yes, I have. And from what I understand, not only were they extremely reclusive, but also stopped being seen altogether about 2 sweeps ago. There was never a documented name, but anyone who heard anything about their activities had taken to calling them by a specific moniker. You're a part of the Mora. He nods silently. What happened to them? I don't know, truthfully. I was already out and very far away before they vanished. Granted, I was trying to keep my distance, but I still knew of some things that were going on. Until one day I just didn't, and neither did anyone else, it seems. Oh, that's just fantastic. And here you were, hoping you could at least get a clue as to where this bunch could be tucked away, if anywhere. I'll admit that does worry me too. My mind jumps to horrible scenarios, and I don't like the idea that something bad could have happened to anyone, regardless of what I think of them. That's a definite possibility, especially if they weren't a particularly large congregation. Do you actually believe they are truly gone? No, I do not. Then here's another question for you. Whether it's the Mora or any other kind of pious syndicate, how far do you think they would go to obtain an artifact substantial enough to claim them the promise of eternal life? I think if you said that to almost anyone, faithful or otherwise, they'd feel similarly. Indisputably, many would do just about anything to get their hands on it. That's quite the colossal concept. Who wouldn't at least be curious in some fashion? Considering the state the world is in, whether eternal life would be a positive or a negative thing is an entirely different discussion, but... anything that gives hope of correcting the horrible problems this planet has, people are going to flock to it, even more so when faith in the divine comes into play. Like, you know, the planet's suns are both dying at an incredibly rapid rate. Here we go again. Yes, I understand the point you're about to make. You do not need to finish it. That turns you a look of embarrassment, with him bashfully putting a hand to his mouth as if to stop himself from speaking on it further. Aww. Are there any other groups you'd like to bring to light? I could use something potentially traceable at the very least. The Mythomaniacs, which I'm sure you've heard plenty about, but I don't think that's a very useful thought. Not exactly the kind that seeks any form of life preservation. Yeah, probably not. There's a pretty deep, sizable cliff to dive from. That's where I started. Their grasps were even hard to shake off for obvious reasons. Wouldn't have been able to do it without a little help. I think her name started with a T. Our conversation was brief, but she looked just as trapped as I was. Honestly, I should have known better and stopped there. But I was still incredibly young and desperate to find a community for myself in something that still felt similar. I thought turning from one faith to another with opposing ideas would be just what I needed, but I was wrong. As it turns out, most religious organisations are rather alike in the end. The trolls I've encountered that tend to rely too heavily on faith usually turn sour from it somehow. It would seem that way, yes. You are growing increasingly impatient with the extraneous musings coming from the talkative characters you seem to have a knack for attracting. You wish you could sympathise more, but right now you have little time for the life stories, folk tales and other tangents that your suspect has regurgitated. Your desire to entertain his personal ramblings is only as strong as the usefulness his information has to your case. It seems the total amount of substance you expected from this conversation has reached its limit, and you have reached yours as well. I think I've heard enough for the time being. Oh, you're all done with me then? I hope I didn't derail you too terribly. I don't believe I have anything else that would warrant further discussion. I can't say for sure if it's been the most productive chat, but it was amiable. So yes, I'm finished. Don't worry, I'll see myself out. Thank you for your time, Mr. Veneer. Of course. I wish you only the best of luck in your case, Regulator. And obviously if there's anything else I can do to help, I'm as open and present as the nighttime sky. Indari nods, but he looks just about ready to follow you out despite your previous statement. You suppress a sigh, nodding with what you hope is a sense of finality. Then you open the door without another word and step into the hallway. The backstage has quieted down considerably by now. There's only a couple trolls or so popping in and out of the other doors as they move things around to finish their cleaning duties. Indari comes to the doorway behind you. He's either decided to actually send you off or simply wishes to move on as well. Either way, you don't need to stick around here any longer. Just as you're about to go on your way, you catch something out of the corner of your eye, an individual at the end of the hall that strikes you as odd. A troll, wearing a dress composed of patches of various colours reminiscent of a panel of stained glass, is watching you. She is completely still, peeking around the turn in the hall with razor-sharp focus. The way she's looking at you suggests much more than simple curiosity over your recent re-emerging. The moment she notices you've seen her, she immediately disappears back around the corner in a flash of colour. Indari seems to have noticed this too, as a small gasp escapes him with the motion. This time, you don't suppress your instincts to pursue a mark. You swiftly unsheath Proserpina and bolt down the hall after her. You are not in the mood for playing around with sketchy shit like that. You lost sight of her. Just as you make your way around the corner, you see the latch of the double doors ahead clicking back to a close. It's the obvious exit, leading outside of the theatre entirely. You rush forward, pushing through them and emerging back onto the streets of Stronghold 21. Your eyes scan the area as you move, searching for that same flash of colour to chase after, looking for where to turn next. You find nothing, even as you explore the closest possible options for her to have escaped through. The spying stranger is gone. With a firm tusk of irritation, you return your blade to its proper resting place. By now, Indari has come out into the street as well, shocked and quite curious about the sequence of events. Perhaps he has enough reasons of his own to be concerned by it. The frustration of yet another important lead slipping right through your fingers so suddenly is evident. You're growing exceptionally tired of these moments leaving you falling short. Though while you may have missed the chance to interrogate a potential spy, you are now absolutely certain of one more thing. You are being more closely and consistently monitored than you thought. Ooh. Spooky. Damn. Wow. I guess we'll have to stick around and see who that mysterious stranger was. Maybe next time or something.